Over the last year, I spent over $300,000 on cars. None of it was planned. I honestly wasn't trying to build a collection or make smart investments. I was just following what felt right at the time and figuring out things as I went. Along the way, I made some expensive mistakes, almost talked myself out of the cars I ended up loving the most, and learned things about car ownership that I really wish I'd known earlier. There was one moment standing in a dealership trying to buy a car entirely in cash where suddenly everything felt very fragile. The cashier's check in my pocket was completely drenched in sweat, and for a split second, I wasn't even sure if it would be accepted. That moment stuck with me because it made something very clear. If you don't get a few simple things right when buying and owning cars, the cost can be massive, especially these, exotic cars. Let me start from the beginning. Before all of this, my entire sports car experience was a manual 2008 NC Miata. I drove that car for 6 or 7 years as my only car. Sold it, and then went almost 2 full years without a sports car at all. At that point, my understanding of cars was pretty basic, manual versus automatic. I knew kind of like the different engine configurations, but that's about it. So when I finally felt ready to jump back in, I started looking at a GT350. On paper, it checked all the boxes. Manual, V8, emotional, but the deeper I went online, the more I saw people talking about the engine issues, oil consumption, oil starvation failures. Some of it was exaggerated, some of it was real, but at the same time, I didn't know enough to separate fact from, the noise, and that kind of scared me away from the car. Looking back, that was my first lesson. When you don't yet trust your own understanding, the internet will make decisions for you. If I'd done more research, I probably would have learned, some ways to mitigate some of those issues with the car. Probably that, it's not actually as common as you might think, and, probably wouldn't have been that big of a deal. Instead of pushing forward, I pivoted. Naturally, I started looking at Porsche. I couldn't afford a GT4, so I looked at some older Cayman GTS cars. They were beautiful, balanced, and objectively great, but something was missing. I wanted something that felt like a bigger leap, something that felt more special. Then I saw the C8 Corvette. Now, this car, when it came out, I believe it was like 2020, 2021, something like that. It looked exotic. The performance numbers were insane for the money. So once I realized how affordable they were relative to what they offered, I was hooked. At the time, it felt like the obvious move. In hindsight, this is where excitement started to outweigh long-term thinking. Because in my head, I thought, I'll buy this car, I'll keep it for a while, I'm probably not going to lose too much money on it, etc. I found a Rapid Blue C8 and I booked a flight to Dallas. Before flying out, I made my first real mistake. I scheduled a PPI, which is a pre-purchase inspection, so you want to do this every time you're going to buy a car, right? I scheduled it for the same day I was landing. While I was at the airport, I got the call. Everything checked out except the AC wasn't blowing cold. I remember thinking, I'm about to fly to buy a car that already has a problem. Stress instantly through the roof. Like, I was so stressed, but there were no other issues. So I negotiated with the dealer. The dealer agreed to split the shipping cost if I decided to move forward. I landed, went straight to the bank, and picked up a cashier's check. I was planning to buy the car entirely in cash. Then I got to the dealership and drove the car. The test drive erased everything else from my mind. Coming from a 2008 Miata, the C8 felt unreal. Dude, it was so fast. The speed, the cockpit, how low it was to the ground. I forgot about the PPI, I forgot about the AC, and I also forgot about the check sitting in my pocket. I knew immediately that I wanted the car. It was only when I got back to the dealership and it was time to actually buy it that reality snapped back in. And I reached into my pocket, the envelope was soaked. The cashier check was literally drenched in sweat. And that's when it hit me, well, what if this isn't even a usable check? If the check tore, smeared, or got rejected, the deal wouldn't just be over, but I would have lost $70,000. Everything slowed down. We carefully slid the check out of the envelope. Thankfully, there was no ink running, no creases. Only once they accepted it did I finally breathe. I feel like I was holding my breath that whole time. I really understood how high the stakes can be if you don't understand every part of the process and if you're not really thoughtful and careful about everything, right? When the car arrived a week later, I learned another lesson. Don't stand inside an enclosed trailer when someone fires up a V8. Pulling the car into my driveway was surreal. Standing in my garage, I realized something important. I didn't just like cars, I loved them. I was obsessed with them. By fall, I wanted something different. A daily driver. Something fun that I can daily, right? And I also missed driving a manual. I remember seeing a Cadillac Blackwing at the same dealer where I bought the Corvette. So there's 2 Blackwings. There's a CT5V Blackwing and a CT4V Blackwing. Upon doing further research, the CT4V Blackwing was significantly cheaper. You get a better steering feel and same shifter. So I decided to target a CT4V Blackwing. It's smaller, more focused, and it's better suited to my life. I found a limited spec car with very low miles, well under MSRP. This time I bought it sight unseen. I still did a PPI, I asked for tons of photos and videos, but I never drove one. When the car arrived, seeing it in person for the first time felt heavy. I'll be honest, I felt some regret Not that I bought the car, but that I never test drove it, because that's a lot to commit to without ever driving the car. If I could do it again, I would have at least test driven another Blackwing first to make sure I liked the experience of the car. He unloaded the Blackwing. I finally got to drive the car. Haven't driven a manual in years. I was rusty, and then it clicked. The shifter was incredible. The steering really talked to you, like you can feel everything. It even felt better to drive than the Corvette, surprisingly. That doubt melted away, as soon as I started driving the car. Some cars don't scream at you immediately. They reward you over time. Another lesson that I've learned applies to both the C8 and the Blackwing. Don't start modifying a car until you're sure you actually want to keep them long term. With both cars, I started modding it way too early. Getting exhaust, PPF, small changes, but they add up quickly. At the time it felt harmless, but mods lock you in emotionally while doing nothing to protect you financially. You're actually going to lose money when you put mods on a car. When I eventually sold the C8, none of the mods mattered. I ended up having to take them all out because they weren't going to increase the value. They wouldn't make the sale easier. They just increased my losses. So I had to sell parts meal, all the mods, sold the C8 at a loss after about a year of ownership. With the Blackwing, I also decided to do everything right from the jump. So I got full satin PPF, carbon trim PPF. On the same day that I got the PPF, I actually took it out. I pulled forward into a parking spot and completely wrecked the front splitter on a curb. It ended up costing me $3,000 to replace the front splitter. Now you better believe from that moment on, I started parking backwards. I'd never parked forward again with that car, especially if there was a curb in front. That moment forced a mental shift. Some parts aren't precious. They're consumables. Once I accepted that, owning the car became a lot more enjoyable. Now for the third and final car, that winter, I caught the Porsche bug really hard. I wanted a GT4 RS. Everyone thought it was the last ICE came in, the last gas powered came in. The markups were wild. I think I was quoted like $280,000 for GT4 RS with the Manthai kit. The only way at that time to get a GT4 RS new was to buy one with a Manthai kit or buy one with an extreme markup, like 80 to 100 grand. This was fun. It took me 3 cars to learn the lesson. Don't overspend on cars, right? I was not gonna spend $280,000 on a Cayman, and then I stepped back and I asked myself, why I wanted, and it wasn't really the car, it was the fear of missing out. I was worried I was going to not be able to buy a GT4 RS, brand new. I was never going to be able to experience that car, right? And at the end of the day, what I actually loved was the engine. So that led me to a 991.2 GT3. And I actually prefer the look of a 911, especially the 991.2 GT3. Now, I flew to Florida to check out this car, and man, this was different. This was different than every other car that I've ever driven. You turn on the car, it sounds like a lawnmower. Like it sounds like it's broken. And then you get in, dude, the steering, the way it felt, how low it was, even lower than the Corvette, man, it was insane. I love the car so much, I could not stop thinking about it. I didn't want to wait. I didn't want them to ship the car. I decided, you know what? I'm going to drive it home. 700-mile road trip with a stock 991.2 GT3. I don't know if you'll believe me, but I wanted the road trip to last longer. Like by the time I got home, I was like, I love this car. That drive taught me more about the car than any spec sheet ever could. If you are buying a car and you're able to drive it home, highly, highly recommend it. It's such a good experience. Every time I think about buying the car, I just like smile. Like it was just such a good experience. 10 out of 10, would definitely do it again. Now buying all of these cars in such a short period of time was a mistake. After the GT3, the C8 barely got driven. Not because it wasn't good, but because the GT3 reset my baseline. The only car I still drove regularly was Blackwing because it offered something completely different. It's a manual. In hindsight, I should have slowed everything down. When you move too fast, you appreciate things less. Eventually, I sold the C8 at a loss, and that's not even counting what I lost on mods and protection. Most cars will lose you money. That's another big, huge lesson. I got lucky with the GT3. It's worth more now in 2026 than it was when I bought it. That wasn't planning. That was just timing. And I don't take any credit at all for that. Because of all this, I'm slowing down. I want to enjoy the cars I have, not for what they represent, but for what they offer. Cars aren't investments. They're experiences. And they're meant to be driven. When you rush through experiences, you miss what makes them special. If you want to see how I turned my GT3 into the best street car it can be, that video is linked right here. And if you're chasing a dream car of your own, slow down, enjoy the process, and make sure you're learning from other people's mistakes before making your own. I'm planning on making a full exotic car buying guide, so definitely don't want to miss that. Subscribe, comment down below what your experiences are buying cars. If you have any horror stories and have any tips, please let me know in the comments down below. And always remember, your dreams are inevitable.